Okay, this is my third attempt at this video. Oh, Lord. Okay, I'm just going to read off my notes because I get too distracted. So, okay, we are talking about something that's kind of a big concept today. And this is called Cosmic-Interpersonal Linearity. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so on a cosmic scale, there are certain things that are not arbitrary. There are certain moral codes that if you do not have them set in place, it doesn't matter what the sentient creatures look like, doesn't matter where they live, doesn't matter what they do, if they don't follow a certain moral code, their civilization will either self-destruct or it will never advance. So, for example, if a society is allowed to lie to one another, on a grand scale, you know, their politics will start to crumble, their businesses will fail, and then on an interpersonal relationship, they will not have any close relationships because if they lie to each other all the time, there would be no trust. There would be no way to know, are you really my friend? Do you really have my back? And then again, with something like murder, if everybody was allowed to just murder and there was no law against it, when somebody had anger towards somebody, they just kill them. Well, imagine how many people would be dead all the time, right? And if it wasn't any big deal, people would, eventually your civilization would break down because people would just be killing each other all the time. If people were allowed to steal stuff from each other all the time, well, if it was just allowed, can you imagine if someone just waltzed into your house and was like, yeah, I'm going to take this, and you couldn't do anything about it, and you're just like, okay, and they just took your stuff, which is very much like communism, right? Your civilization would eventually peter out. It would eventually fail, right? So there are certain things that we can agree on that we go, okay, that would never work. On a cosmic scale, that would never work. On an interpersonal scale with another human being, if I lied or always took your stuff or killed you, I wouldn't have any interpersonal relationships. There would be no relationship with another person. So when I say, and then the word that I chose was linearity, because it's very much like walking on a tightrope. There's only so much room here for error. If I deviate off the line, I'm gonna fall. I'm gonna fall. So if I'm walking on this line and I'm checking myself constantly to make sure that I'm not lying, I'm not stealing, I'm not, well, I might not murder anybody, outright. Hopefully, I never would. But having that amount of hatred in my heart, because that phrase sometimes when we go, "You're dead to me," and we just we almost kill a person emotionally in our mind or our heart. It's the same thing. And Jesus talked about that. He said, "Don't have murder or hatred in your heart," because it's the same thing. The only thing you have different in you is impulse control. Sometimes the only difference between us and a murderer or a rapist is our impulse control. And that's a pretty, like, when I sat with that for a while, I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. Like, if I didn't have impulse control, so you have to be really, really careful with yourself because you're a monster. People don't like to face that. You're a monster. But so is everybody else around you, so, but there's a very fine line that we have to walk, just like a tightrope. And most people think that God just arbitrarily put rules out in place, like, you cannot steal, you cannot lie, blah, 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 and that he's talking down to us. But in actuality, it's like there's this code that's out there, like a software code. And God simply already knew it. He just knew what it was, and he created creatures, and then he said, okay, guys, here's the code for life, okay? Here's the software for life. If you choose to follow it, you'll be fine. If you choose not to, things are going to go wrong. Things will go bad. And, we chose in the beginning to veer off of this line, and that's why I think we call it the fall. Because if you think about it, it's like if you're walking on a tightrope and then you veer off, what happens? You start falling, right? And I've talked about this before, but there is something wonderful about the sensation of falling, right? It's kind of like it's really fun to jump off of a cliff for a second, but then when you splatter at the bottom, it's sure not fun, So there's this, You know, we want to fall. We like that. You know, like when someone tells a dirty joke when you're in middle school or something, there's something so like, you know, funny about it, even though it's bad and we know it. We like to enjoy to be bad. We just do. There's something about that internal falling, that internal gravity pulls us down. Anyway, so, but the rules that God sought to enforce from the beginning, and we'll even go through the Old Testament stuff, and I'll show you guys a few things. But all the rules that God really ever sought to enforce had to do with a couple of things. They either had to do with the direct preservation of society or life, or they had to do with the fostering of warm feelings and or eventual love. So, you know, because if you operate in a society where you're allowed to murder, lie, steal, cheat, take other people's stuff, then there's not going to be a whole lot of warm feelings on an interpersonal level, and cosmically your society is going to fail, right? So without the rules that God enforced, there would be chaos. That's what would happen. These rules apply cosmically, not just territorially. You cannot have the apex of connection, which is love. You can't have that without rules and boundaries. And people all the time are trying to slice away rules and boundaries from love. But you know, if you think about it, like if you go into let's say that someone told me, like, you cannot have one husband. You can be shared. Like, you know, and that's what used to happen to women. Like, you know, you would be put in a harem or something, and you know, there's something about it in my spirit that would just sink, because it's like, oh, you know, but I just want one person. I just want to be loved by one. I don't want to be shared in that way. You know, I want one person to love me. And you know, so the boundary of two people, you know, like sharing their secrets, sharing their love, sharing their bodies, sharing their home, you know, there's something extremely precious about that, because you can't really share yourself in that way with a ton of people. It's not possible. You know, you're only built to really do that with one person. And so, you know, if you try to do it with multiple people, you're split up. It's almost like having multiple personalities, really. So, but when you do that with just one, it's beautiful. You know, it's wonderful. But with the loss of boundary, you know, it demolishes that. And then think about if someone said, well, you can't have a home. You can't do that. You can share a commune with a lot of people, but you can't have a home, and you can't decorate the way that you want, and you can't have your own space, and you can't have it. And that's kind of what communism is leading us down towards, right? You know, where we can't have boundaries and say, this is mine. You know, they want open borders, open society, open. And the more that we open everything up, the fewer boundaries there are, and there's this kind of like lost feeling, this like void feeling that comes over everybody, right? Nothing is mine. I belong to no one. Nothing belongs to me. And you're swimming in this voidness, right? So we don't want that. But if we say there are no boundaries, it's a lot easier to live in chaos, right? To live in a big swarmy mess. It's kind of like keeping your room clean. You know, if you have a really tidy room, there's a lot of boundaries, and you're like, this drawer is for this. This file is for this. This is for this, this is for this, and you have a lot of boundaries. And so someone who's not a tidy person might go crazy about that. But if you're organized, you can get a lot more done, because you know exactly where all your things are, and when you walk into your space, it's clean, it's tidy, and there's boundaries. So what happens, though, because human beings are quite emotional creatures, we're very, very emotional. And what happens to us is when we do something that we know to be morally wrong, we a lot of times when we first do that, and it, like, you know, think about when you were a pretty young kid and you did something wrong and someone caught you, you know, and gave you the look, you know, there's this feeling of like, there's a guilt feeling, right? And then there can also be a shame feeling. You know, guilt is when you knew you did something wrong and you're like, oh yeah, you're right, I'm sorry. Shame is when you want to run and hide, you know, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I can't believe I did that. And shame is a very, that can be really damaging. What people don't understand is that there's a difference between shame and guilt, and people want to always say, well, you shouldn't be ashamed of anything. You should just go and do what you're going to do. And that's not good either, because what happens then is that you start embracing bad behaviors and trying to champion those bad behaviors. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna lie and I'm gonna like it, you know, I'm gonna cheat and steal and do a bunch of bad stuff, and I'm really good at being bad, you know, and that's not going to make you happy, because you're just deviating off that line like something, you know, major. And it's like being in surgery, you know, like you're kind of your own surgeon in life, and when you walk on that line, it's like sewing yourself up. But then when you start deviating off the path, it's like just going crazy with the knife, you know. It's like, you know, you can't expect to heal if you do that, if you deviate off the line. So without those boundaries, you're kind of miserable, really. You know, it's like living in a really, really messy home. People who live in super, super messy homes, you know, even though they might, you know, say that, you know, those people usually are not very happy. I mean, we've all watched those hoarding shows and things like that, right? And there's something that's off. There's something that's wrong. And so we need to be able to have boundaries and to fix things and say, you know, this is not the best. Or think about, you know, the people who like are celebrating being overweight. There's nothing wonderful about being overweight. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a time to embrace people who have curves or whatever. You know, everybody's got different body types. But I'm talking about morbidly obese. There's nothing glorious or good about that. And I deal with people on a regular basis who are overweight or struggle with their weight or struggle with food and all that stuff. And, you know, I would have been, had I not dealt with it, I would have been very overweight and obese. And if I was like, well, I'm, you know, just love me because I'm curvy or whatever, you know, it wouldn't make me really happy. I would just be trying to defend a bad lifestyle, and I would know that deep down. And so it wouldn't make me happy. And even though I might demand that you be my champion and, you know, and say that it's a good thing, I would know that it's not a good thing. And so I would be miserable inside. But I would be running from my, you know, my shame and trying to be bold-faced about it, right? You know, and that's not going to help anything either. So what we have to do is we have to be able to go, oh, that's a bad thing to do. Okay, well, how can I fix it, right? And we can only do that really when someone holds our hand and loves us through it, because otherwise we get really hard on ourselves. We either get really hard on ourselves or we go bold-faced. And so when someone can look at you and go, you're a stinker and this needs to change, but guess what? I really, really love you and we're going to get through this together. Well, then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay. You know, and so what happened at the beginning was God gave us, you know, this standard to follow, and then we went way far off of it, right? And he said, you know, what happened? Did you do something wrong? Did you do what I told you not to do? You know? And we hid and we said, yes, I did. And we got really ashamed, and so we ran and we hid, right? And, you know, think about that with in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve, what did they do? They covered, you know what I mean? It's just like little kids, you know, don't look at me, you know. And so instead of doing that, what we can do, what we have the freedom to do, is to go, I'm in the wrong, and I want to fix this. And not to have shame attached to it. Shame doesn't need to be attached to it. And the reason why I love this idea of cosmic interpersonal linearity is, think about going to a shooting range, and you're firing, you know, either a gun or an arrow down at your target. And you have to stay in your lane. You can't just go willy-nilly and start shooting everywhere, because that's going to hurt people. And if you just say, oh, you can just shoot anywhere, you don't have to hit the target, that takes away the whole purpose of of shooting, right? You're like, no, I wanna know if I can hit the target. And in life, it's like, now they've told us, oh, there's no target, don't worry about it. You just aim anywhere, and all is all, and, you know, whatever, anything goes, you know what I mean? And that's just, then you just feel like kind of self-defeated. You're like, so it doesn't even matter if I shoot the target? Like, I can aim for the target, hit a bullseye, and it doesn't matter any more than if I just, like, shot somebody else's lane, like in the wall. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. So that takes away any incentive to do anything, right? You're like, well, that's stupid. Might as well not even play the game. And so then we get people who are depressed or commit suicide or whatever, you know, because there's no purpose. But if you're shooting down at your firing lane, and you really do want to be a good shot, you can practice at that. But let's say that you have some sort of let's say you have some sort of disease where your hands shake all the time, you know, and you're trying really hard, but you can't ever shoot straight because your hand shakes. Well, that's basically now, hang on. So when I say sin, think about this for a second. If there's a cosmic constant that we're supposed to be following, okay, and then we have something in us that's wrong and broken, I call sin systematic internal negativity, which just means that there's something in you internally and very consistent, very systematic, that will always go towards the negative. It will always go down. You know, I always tell my little kids, do you want to go up or do you want to go down? There's something in us that no matter how hard we try, we just end up going down. And we don't even want to sometimes, but we do. You know, we overeat, we say the wrong thing, we lash out at somebody, we do something stupid, you know, we purposefully self-sabotage, whatever it is, you know. And so it's almost like we were entered into a contest at our birth, you know what I mean? To see if we can shoot this target. And we try so hard, but our hands shake so bad and we're just shooting off the line. And then we have a trainer who comes and he puts his really steady hands around our hands and he helps us to shoot. And that person is Jesus. And he's the one who can guide our hands. You know, we can't do that for ourselves, but he can. And so what else did I say? So God is not the cosmic constant. The cosmic constant is the rules that are already out there, that they just exist in not even in the universe. They just are. Like, it's more constant than anything, you know, besides God. God is the energy source. He's life and love. Okay? And he knows these rules. So he knew the recipe for love and simply chose to share that with us. That was what he did. You know, he said, if you follow this line, you can achieve, because aiming that target, you're aiming for love every time. That's really what you're aiming at. You're aiming for love. Because even think about, you know, when you have a business or something, the ultimate prize for a business is not just to make money, but to make something that helps people or makes the world better somehow by your product. And what is that? Warm feelings. And what are warm feelings? That's really love. That's really what it is. So we become very aware of this standard, and you know, we might say, oh, I don't believe in morality. I just believe that everything is, and everyone can just kind of do their own thing. You know, we might say that, but we don't believe that, because once somebody starts doing something to us that violates the standard, that cosmic constant, once they start getting off on their interpersonal linearity with us, we have a bone to pick with them. We for sure have a bone to pick with them. So when other people act out against us, we start having an issue. And you know, even if we don't say that we believe in morality, all of a sudden we do. All of a sudden we do. If someone comes into your house and let's say you have a really nice, like, just whatever your nicest thing is. Like for me, it would probably be my bookshelf, my beloved bookshelf. If someone came in with a sledgehammer and just demolished this thing, I can't even tell you how upset I'd be. You know, there are certain things that we all have where you're like, do not violate my space, do not violate my stuff, don't violate my heart, right? We have those boundaries. And so that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. We'll get into some of this other stuff later on. But how did I do? Oh, good. I'm right at the 20-minute mark. So that is what I'm talking about with cosmic constant, or cosmic interpersonal linearity. And when it comes to not hitting that target, that's really what the Bible was even saying when they said sin. Because I didn't get this for a long time, but they would say, oh, you know, it's like when you're shooting, they were talking about arrows. And when the arrow would miss the target, it was called a sin. And I was like, what? Because whenever I would do something wrong in my life, I was just overwhelmed by feelings of shame, you know, and I wanted to run from God and run from everybody, you know, and be like, oh, I'm totally messed up and screwed up. Well, yeah, you are, you know, from birth, honey, you're screwed up. There's no getting around it, you know. And we always act like we are born spotless and then stuff happens to us, and the truth is we're born these little monster beings, you know, that have to be trained how to become an innocent being, you know. It's not the other way around. And so we have to, I'm sorry, I'm like having a heat stroke. This thing is on. Oh, my heater's on. Turn that off. Oh, Lord. Okay. And it's really pretty freeing when you do that, because then it basically, what it is kind of like, you know, God, has a really nice house. And he loves you, and he wants you to come inside where all the nice furniture is, and, you know, the china and all that stuff. But, you know, you've been running around in the yard like a dirty little ragamuffin, you know, and then, you know, he's like, okay, come inside. Oh, okay, wait a minute. We gotta wipe off your feet, and we gotta wash you up first. And that's really all it is. It's not like, you there, you scumbag, you know. He already knows who we are and what we are, and he loves us. He absolutely adores us, and it doesn't make any sense. You know, it makes no sense. Why does anybody love anybody? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense, because we're all such screw-ups. You know what I mean? Why does a mom love her baby? You know what I mean? It cries. It just goes to the bathroom all the time. Needs to be fed all the time. And you just see the mom just, you know, and then why does a man love a woman? I don't know. You know what I mean? We're crazy. And then the man is just like, oh, you're just amazing. Why? You know? No, I'm not, you know. And then, you know, why do we feel that way about men? It's just, it defies all reason. You know what I mean? Love defies all reason at all. You know, so why would God look at, you know, these little human creatures and just love them so much? I don't know, but I'm sure glad he does, because we'd all be dead, you know. So he looks on us with such love, and, you know, we're always like, oh, I'm not worthy. And he's like, I know. Frankly, I don't care. The whole plan and the whole purpose is to take these beings who have you know, chosen to be bad. You chose that, you know, from the beginning, and then, you know, and now you're navigating this whole thing of, well, do I want to be good? Do I want to be bad? Do we make those choices every day? And he's like, if you line up with my line, we are going to have a blast. We're going to have such a good time creating awesome, just amazing stuff. But you got to be on this line, because that's where life is and that's where love is. Do you want to go on that line? And then, you know, a lot of times we go, no, I want to do my own thing. I want to go out and where the chaos is. I want to swim in dark waters, and I want to get really dirty, you know. And then, you know, once we have had our little, you know, freak out time or whatever, and then we go, you know, oh, people are up there actually creating stuff and doing stuff and like loving each other. You know, I want to go up on that line. And it's hard. It's just like watching someone climb Mount Everest. You know, it's not a cakewalk, but it's worth it when you're standing at the top. So yeah. So but there's no, get rid of the shame. There's no, you know, and that's why it says there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Just no shame, no shame. Doesn't mean that you're not guilty. You know, you go, guilty, you know, I sped, you know, yeah, I did that, and I shouldn't do that again. It really is just like getting, you know, if you get pulled over by a cop, and I am so the shame person, right? So I'll get pulled over by a cop, and just, you know, like the flushed face and the, you know, the pounding heartbeat. And then other people get pulled over, and I'm always jealous of these people. They get pulled over, and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, I sped, you know, I won't do it again. And I'm like, oh, how do you do that? How do you like acknowledge something that you did was wrong and not have any shame about it? I'm working on it. But it really is like that. You know, you did something wrong, and then we can repair it. You know, and sometimes you do a wrong and you hurt somebody. And when you hurt somebody, you have to sit with hurting them, and you have to sit with sad feelings, because if you just gloss over it, well, then that's not good for the relationship, right? You have to go, oh, I hurt you, cry and empathize with them. And, you know, and we hurt God all the time. And so, you know, empathizing with that, oh, that, you know, pain, right? Sitting with pain, sitting with hurt. That's not very fun. Sometimes we want to just, you know, brush it off. And that's not good either, you know. But recognizing that I don't need to run and hide. I don't need to have this, you know. I can have this, you know, where I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you know. And you come with the sorry note and the flowers, and I'm sorry, you know. But not the running and the hiding. That we don't need that. So anyway, that's my notes. I'm trying to make things really simple. Sometimes, you know, you need a really, you know, high level vocabulary and big concepts, and then sometimes you need body language. And so I hope I'm not like, you know, of being over simple, but I want people to get this in a way that goes here and not here, if that makes sense. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon.